Thank you. I know. I know I'm biased because she's my dog, but I think she's the cutest dog ever. Although, although, although whenever I go to a dog park, so this is something really cool that I've never seen in Russia, or at least I've never seen in Novosibirsk. I don't know if I've seen it in other countries, but here they have something called dog parks and actually off-leash dog parks. So these are parks where you go and you can officially let your dog run free. Because actually most places in the US, you have to have your dog on a leash. You can't just let it run free. You can get a huge fine if you do that. And so, yeah, so you can take your dog to a dog park and it'll run there and play with all the other dogs. And there is a dog park near here called Marymore Dog Park. And it's huge. I don't even know. I guess the territory is maybe kind of the size of Novosibirsk Central Park, maybe bigger. So it's really huge territory with a river and trees and grass. And at any given time, there are about 200 dogs there. So it's amazing. The first time I saw this park, I thought this is what heaven looks like, because there are everywhere you see there are dogs and they're playing and getting along. And there are Labradors and Corgis and I don't know. Yeah, yeah, dogs have pretty good life here. I think my dog, she is super happy because we live in Washington State. So Seattle is in Washington. And there are rivers and lakes and the ocean. And so we take her swimming every week. In the summer, she went swimming, I would say maybe 2-3 times a week. Now it's usually once a week, and she's a Labrador, which means she loves swimming. So, yeah, now it's kind of cold and it gets dark early. So she doesn't get to swim as much, unfortunately. But I always say that she's living her best life here in Washington. So, yeah. So we have still a few more minutes left, so I want to give people some time to join. And so, like I was saying, if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to write your questions in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them as the best I can. So anything about the US or English. I love questions. So, yeah, so we have about an hour today together. And I have some stuff I'd like to tell you, but then if you get questions as I'm talking, I'll do my best to watch the chat and to make sure I answer them. Okay, looks like people are still arriving, so I'm still giving a few minutes to everyone. But I'll just say hi. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I'm really happy to see you, or to know, I mean, I don't see you, but I know that you're there. That's making me happy that you're spending your Wednesday afternoon with me. It's Wednesday in Novosibirsk, right? The reason I'm asking is that for me, it is. Okay, so I'm 15 hours behind you. So it is 9 p.m. on a Tuesday night. So for me, it's still the 27th of November. For you guys, it's the 28th of November. So you're living in the future. I'm living in the past. And so sometimes I kind of have to check. You're ahead. Yes, you're ahead. And guess what? On New Year's, you guys are going to be in 2019, 15 hours before me. So, you know, that's completely crazy to me. You know, when I call my parents in Novosibirsk and they're like, hey, it's 2019. And I'm like, no, it's still 2018, you know? So that's totally crazy that two countries can exist in different years. It's just mind-blowing. Okay, so according to my clock, it is 12 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and start. So my name is that okay to start? Olga Mikhailovna, I'm just waiting for your word. Yes, okay, wonderful. So, yeah, my name is Yuliya Speroff. I'm originally from Novosibirsk. I was born there. I lived there for most of my life so far. But I've also lived in the UK, in New Zealand, in Turkey. I spent 3.5 years in Turkey where I was teaching English at a private university. And then most recently I moved to the US. I live in Seattle now, state of Washington, like I mentioned, West Coast. I've been living here for just over a year. I've been an English teacher for about 10 years. And I also teach Russian as a foreign language. I also do teacher training. And in the US, I've been doing, most of my work is spent working as an interpreter. And so, here, an interesting thing is that here in the US, by law, if you don't speak English or if you speak English but not well enough, hospitals and schools and even prisons have to provide you with interpreters. So the school or the hospital, they have to pay for the interpreter to come and help you at the doctor's office. And so that's what I do most of the time. I go to hospitals and schools and I help people communicate. I also teach Russian as a foreign language to some American people here. Obviously, this is America. So, and then I also teach English. Mostly these days, I teach English over Skype. But I also spend some time teaching English to refugees and immigrants, so people who come here and who need English to basically survive. And so US is not my first English-speaking country. It's actually my third English-speaking country after UK and after New Zealand. And, not all English-speaking countries are the same. And there are some things I learned about the English language and, of course, about the culture, because language is always connected to the culture, that I wanted to share with you that I thought is interesting. And like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions. So let's start. Let's see. Yes, here's my first slide. It's all about small talk. So in the US, nothing happens until you've done small talk. What is small talk exactly? Well, these is basically, this is like some things that you say to somebody that is not about nothing serious, mostly about the weather. The British aren't the only people who like to talk about the weather. So a lot of things start with small talk. So let's say you go to the bank, right? Before you can actually get down to business and say that you came there to open a new credit card or, I don't know, whatever you came there to do, the bank manager will ask you, how are you? And how are you is a greeting. What I mean by that is that people say, how are you all the time? And as you've probably heard, nobody really wants you to tell them how you really are. So if a bank manager says, how are you? You shouldn't say, well, actually, my back is kind of hurting me and, the traffic is horrible. You say, fine, thanks, how are you? So it's just a way to to say hello. And people will ask you, how are you in a supermarket? You come to the supermarket, the cashier, the person who scans your groceries, and then the person who packs your groceries will also ask you, how are you? I mean, literally anyone you see during the day will ask you, how are you? And so anyway, you come to the bank manager will say, how are you? Then start with a small talk. So right now we're between two holidays. Thanksgiving was last week. Then Christmas is happening in about a month. So right now people are asking each other, did you have a good Thanksgiving? Then probably starting next week, people are going to start asking each other, do you have any plans for holidays? People also ask, did you have a good weekend, or do you have any weekend plans? And for me, that was kind of weird, especially when I came to the supermarket, And, there was this lady that I've never seen in my life, and she's scanning my stuff, and she says, "So, what are your plans for the weekend?" And I was kind of, why do you want to know? It's none of your business what I'm going to do at the weekend, but that's just how it is. And part of it is that it's just a social rule. This is what people, do. And part of it, a lot of people like supermarket workers, they have to say this. This is like part of their script. Some of the things that they have to say to customers, and so it's the same in business. So whenever you're doing business with someone, quite often, what do you answer? The truth. About the weekend, I have nothing to, normally if I don't really have anything really interesting to say, I'll just say, oh, I'll just go for a walk, or I'll just say, I'll probably go and hang out with my dog and people like that. So I usually just tell the truth and without too many details. I don't give people my itinerary, like at 9:00, I'm going to meet a friend. And actually with I started talking about a bank manager. I actually went to the bank. The bank manager asked me about my plans, and I said, hey, I'm going to take my dog to the dog park. And turned out he has a dog too. And he just like ran to his office and brought me a portrait of his dog. And we spent maybe 20 minutes, talking about dogs and showing each other pictures of our dogs. That's not very typical. But yeah, it does happen. And it's perfectly normal to sort of have this conversation with a stranger and you'll never see them again. But yet, you share all of this information with them. So, and even when you're doing business with somebody, let's say you're calling a business partner, it's not very polite to just say, hey, I'm calling about a problem. First you kind of ask, how's the weather, especially if that somebody lives in another city or another state. How are you? So small talk is pretty important here. And then obviously safe topics for small talk are always weather, and then traffic. That's another thing. Maybe sports. People here really love sports, and we'll talk about this in a little while. Maybe pets, families could be a sensitive topic. Definitely not politics, because, here, just like everywhere, this could be a dangerous territory to get into. Yeah. Okay. And then also connected to the topic of small talk is being an active listener. And what I mean by that is when you're talking to somebody, whether it's small talk or whether it's actually, somebody telling you something, a story, it's a polite thing to do. A polite thing to do is to listen and to react. And basically, if somebody's telling you a story and you're just standing there and you might be listening very carefully, you might be paying attention, but if you're just sitting there going, people will think you're rude. People will think, you're not paying attention or you don't care. And so a good thing to do is to, sort of ask these questions like, oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. And you don't have to overact. You don't have to go like, wow, really? You can just be like, oh, really? Okay. So basically it's just something that shows that you're paying attention, that you're listening, that you're finding this interesting. You can also ask follow-up questions, sort of like, oh, wow, and, and then what happened, and what did she say, and what did you do, and where did you go? You can also use tags, like you have these tag questions like, you're a teacher, aren't you? And so you can also use these tags to show that you're paying attention, that you're an active listener. So if somebody says, we went to Hawaii last week, and you say, oh, did you? Oh, wonderful. Yeah, tell me more about it. So it doesn't mean that I'm doubting that they went to Hawaii. I'm just like, oh, that's great. It's interesting. Or like, I'm a teacher, but in my spare time, I'm also a firefighter. Oh, are you? Wow. That's so cool. So, kind of reacting. It's a polite thing to react to what people are saying. And another thing is using positive language. So people here, this is America, so people here say awesome a lot. That's like the main word, like awesome, great. So again, that's a very polite thing to sort of kind of overreact to everything. And just say awesome all the time or great. Even when people do something really small for you, like a small favor, you don't just say thank you, say, oh, great, thank you so much, wonderful, all right, yes, great, thank you. So I know this sounds like a lot, but this is how it is here. You have to be super positive. And then, of course, if somebody tells you some bad news, you don't say, oh, awesome. A lot of people say, I'm sorry. And that doesn't mean that you're apologizing. Like, it doesn't mean that you did something wrong. But if somebody says, like, oh, hey, I don't know, like, my husband is sick, or, I lost my dog. So you say, oh, I'm very sorry to hear that. Or just like, I'm sorry. So that's just how you react to somebody telling you bad things. You say, I'm sorry. Even if you did nothing wrong, it just means that, you're sorry. You feel bad that this is happening to this person. So yeah, basically, just to review this section, is that small talk is super important. And don't be surprised when complete strangers ask you, how you are and what your plans for the weekend are. Don't worry, they're not from the FBI. Be an active listener, so react to what people are saying. Ask questions, say things like, oh, really interesting, and, react to bad news and good news appropriately. And if we don't have any questions for this section so far, I'll move on. Any questions? No. Okay then. Do I start such small talks? Sometimes, yeah, I do. Especially if it's somebody that I kind of know. For example, like I said, I work in hospitals a lot as a medical interpreter. And so if I come to a hospital or clinic where I've been before, and I see somebody like a receptionist that I know, I'll ask them how they are. I'll ask them, how their weekend was. It's just, one of the most polite things you can do in a conversation is asking questions. And obviously not personal questions. Don't ask people how much they make or whatever, but just like asking polite questions about weekend plans, holiday plans, things like that. Yeah. Luckily, there's always a holiday, like, like Halloween or something. There's always a holiday that's either just happened or is coming up. So there's always something to talk about. And also we live in Seattle, and Seattle has it has a temperamental climate. So, we can always talk about like, oh, it's been raining for a week. Oh, so yeah. Okay. Thank you for your question, Victoria. I really appreciate your questions and comments. Okay. So moving on. Another thing that I noticed about the English language in the US is that it's all about connected speech. And what is connected speech? Basically, connected speech is the reason why it can be so hard to understand native speakers. And when your students, I'm assuming you're all English teachers, but yeah, when students come up and say, I have such trouble understanding native speakers, whether they're talking about, real people in real life or TV shows, and they say native speakers speak as if they just, swallow part of the words. And the reason why they do that is connected speech. And people are lazy. Humans overall, not Americans, people overall are lazy creatures. We like to make things easy for ourselves. And that means that when we're speaking, making the least amount of effort. And so if I were speaking and pronouncing every word separately, that means I would have to sort of draw a breath every time and say like, do you not want a girlfriend like me? That's like a lot of starts and stops, right? And so instead of do you not, it's easier to say don't you, and then don't you in a quick sort of everyday quick speech becomes don't you. And so that's why I have this slide here. And you see I strategically placed the title of the song on the picture to make it a little bit more appropriate. But yeah, so like that's why the song is called Doncha. It's don't you. And in in English, and then specifically in American English, you'll see a lot of this elements of connected speech. And so one of the features of connected speech is weak forms. So for example, to in connected speech becomes to. So like, do you want to, we don't say, do you want to go somewhere? We say, do you want to go, to. So that little schwa there, can also, whether you speak, I know I sound very American when I say can, but whether you're more British and say can, but yeah, in connected speech, it becomes can, sort of like, can you tell me? So it's not can you tell me, it's can you tell me? Have becomes if. So, have you ever been abroad? Have you ever? So it's not have you, but have you ever been abroad? And these are the things that cause our students so many problems with understanding. And another feature of connected speech is assimilation, and that's the one where that's how doncha happens. So assimilation is when one sound changes another sound that either comes after it or before it. And that happens a lot with auxiliary verbs, so like would, do, did, and so on. So would you becomes woulda, so d and j becomes j. Didn't you becomes didn't you, or don't you, or another one, I didn't write it down, but do you. So when people say do you quickly in everyday speech, it sounds like ju. So sort of like, do you wanna, do. And yeah, for students who learned, especially beginner students and elementary students, they learn about do. And they learn that to make a question, you say, do you? And then when they look at, their grammar exercises, it looks like two separate words, do you. And so they're totally not expecting to hear somebody say, do. Sounds like one word and weird word, right? And so, yeah, that's one reason it's so hard. Another feature of connected speech is Elysian. And Elysian simply means that something that was there is not there anymore. We allied, or do I only have problems with video? That's a good question. Does anybody else have a problem with video? Can somebody please tell me whether or not you can see me? You do. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, Svetlana Anatolievna, I'm sorry you're having a problem with video. Maybe try to restart. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for letting me know it's okay. Okay, Natalia, you said no. I'm wondering. Okay, everything is fine. Thank you so much. It's very reassuring. Yes, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so anyway, back to connected speech. So we talked about, what did we talk about? We talked about weak forms, we talked about assimilation, and we're now talking about elision. And so elision, like I said, is when an element is removed. So the easiest, or probably the most common form of elision that you've probably, seen a lot is contraction of auxiliary verbs. Actually, you know what? I'm really embarrassed to say this, and I have been a teacher, like I said, for over 10 years, and it's only something like a few years ago I realized that apostrophe is there to replace something that we've removed from the sentence. So anyway, contraction of auxiliary verbs, it's something like I'm or we've. Also, another thing that happens is that unstressed syllables, as we all know, that's where schwa is hiding. The sound like in the word raspberry. There's no berry, it's raspberry. So it's kind of like sound. And what happens is that when it's not stressed, it's not even schwa. We just lose that syllable completely, like in the word chocolate. So it's not chocolate, it's chocolate, chocolate. Or like vegetable, Although our students like to say vegetables, don't they? But yeah, it's vegetable. And then another thing is that, another feature of Elysian is that V, or the sound V, can disappear in or before consonants. So one example is the list of my problems. So it's the list of my problems. List of my problems. We just lost that V there. Right. So here's a little exercise. As English teachers, we all like transcription, although now, a lot of modern teachers, especially native speakers, they don't really learn IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet. And so, yeah, so not everybody can do it, but basically here you have 3 questions, and all 3 questions are spelled out in their connected speech form, right? So I'm going to give you a minute. Try to read these questions and try to say them out loud. You don't have to answer. You don't have to write in the chat. Just sort of try to see if you can figure out what they are. And then I'll count down 1 minute and then I'll tell you. I know that the webinar kind of got a little bit academical all of a sudden. The first part was pretty easy, all about small talk and dogs. But the next part we'll kind of switch gears, and we're talking about pronunciation. We'll switch gears. We'll talk about vocabulary. Okay, so it's been a minute or close enough. The first question is, do you like it? Or if it sounded, in very proper speech, do you like it? In everyday speech, do you like it? Second one, what you want to talk about? Or what do you want to talk about? In connected speech, what you want to talk about? And finally, the third one is not a complete question, but a part of a question. Have you ever been to? As in, have you ever been to England? Have you ever been to London? Have you ever been to? Have you ever been to London? So hopefully you were able to read all that. And, if you want to learn more about connected speech, about how to teach students connected speech, or maybe you yourself would like to know more about it, feel free to contact me. I think I'll have my email on the last slide, or I can put it in here. And maybe we can even have a webinar about it. But if not, I have some resources that I'm happy to share about teaching connected speech, or at least elements of connected speech to students. Okay, so moving on, the third thing that I learned about the English language in the US. Another thing I learned today is that technology can fail you at any moment, just when you least expect it, and it's just not gonna work for you. While the slide is loading, I can still talk. And so the third thing, there we go, thank you. The third thing that I learned is that it's all about sports. And, every country has its own sport that it likes. In Russia, it's football, or soccer, as people here call it, and hockey. Here, people love American football and baseball and hockey to a lesser extent. And people are obsessed with it. Seriously, on the days when there is a big match, and for example, Seattle has its own football team. And when I say football, I mean American football. And that's a very sort of violent, brutal sport, very similar to rugby. So it's, the football players are usually really big guys, very strong, and, they wear helmets and uniforms, and they just sort of smash into each other on the field. So Seattle has its own team, Seahawks, and on the days that there is a game, you'll go anywhere. You'll go to a hospital, you'll go to a bank, and you'll see people wearing sort of, t-shirts or hoodies, but, things that have Seahawks colors and Seahawks logos. So that, for me, that's totally unexpected. You go to a hospital and, a nurse will be wearing scrubs, and scrubs is, something that doctors and nurses wear, just like sort of these pajamas. And so, yeah, a nurse, hello from Novosibirsk. Hello, Novosibirsk. So, yeah, you'll go to a hospital and a nurse will be wearing scrubs on the bottom and then like a Seahawks t-shirt on top. And that's normal, Or same in a bank, you'll have a bank manager wearing a Seahawks t-shirt. And so I'm telling you all this just to kind of make you understand just how crazy Americans are about sports. And also, there is something, another thing that's pretty unusual here is that people are really interested in college sports. And in the US, you probably, I don't know if you know, but college is the synonymous with university. So in Russia, we have that distinction where college is kind of like a lesser institution. You have like college and then university, right? Well, here it's the same. And actually, school also means the same as university. So college, university, school, these words mean exactly the same. And so, especially in context of medicine and law, so somebody will tell you, I went to law school or Harvard Law School, or somebody will say, I go to med school. So what they mean is that they're actually studying in a university to become a doctor or a lawyer. But it just so happens that it's called school. Or people will tell you something like, I have a friend, she's my age, which is, I'm not telling you what it is, but anyway, let's say she's in her 30s. And, we were talking and I said, what are you, she said, I'm not happy in my job. And I said, well, are you going to look for a new job? And she was like, no, I think I'm thinking of going back to school. And so it doesn't mean that at the age of 32, she's going back to school, like school 137. She's thinking of returning to university. And since she already has a bachelor degree, she will probably do a master's degree in something. And so you have bachelor degree, and then you have master's, and then you have PhD. And so your students are watching this webinar as well. Wonderful. I love it. So where was I? Right. So this is a little bit not about the topic of sports, but I think it's pretty interesting. It was something I had to learn about as well. And so you have your bachelor's, master's degree, and PhD. So bachelor's is called, it could be, you could still say that it's school or college or university, but we call it undergraduate degree or undergrad. So people say, for my undergrad, I went to Belmont University. And then in Russia, we talk about faculties, like faculty of the English language or faculty of engineering. Well, here they talk about majors. So they say something like, I have a bachelor in education and I majored in the English language. And then everything above bachelor, such as master's and PhD, is called graduate school or grad school. And so students are called graduate students or grad students. And so this is really confusing because you have school, college, university, and all of this is talking about the same thing. And actually the word college is probably used most often. So you talk about, he's a college student. There is a college campus here. Even though the name would actually have the name university in it, like you'll say Vanderbilt University, and he's a college student at Vanderbilt University. So crazy. And how is this connected to sport? Well, one thing that's really popular here, professional sport is obviously popular, But people are also crazy about college sports, in particular college football, and college basketball. I'm not sure about college baseball as much. And so as a result of all of this sport madness, there are so many sports idioms in the American English language. So other forms of English, like British English, they also share some idioms with American English, but not all of them. A lot of them are very American idioms, especially the idioms that come from baseball and that come from American football. And, I speak English on a daily basis. And I've noticed for some reason, doctors really like to use sports idioms. Maybe because, when people are fighting a disease or an illness, you can kind of talk about, somebody winning, either the patient winning or the disease winning. So maybe that's why. But yeah, doctors really love sports idioms, and I hate it because even though I know most of them, and I can figure out, even if I've never heard this idiom, I can kind of figure out the meaning of the idiom from context. It's hard to translate into Russian, right? And so just to give you some example, right off the bat, that comes from baseball, and it just means at the beginning. So, when I came to the US, I had to learn driving right off the bat because public transport here is not great. And actually, it's hard to believe, but some places do not have public transport. And so not only did I have to learn to drive, but right off the bat, I had to drive on highways, which is a whole new ball game. It means it's totally something that is totally different, something that has totally different rules. So driving on American highways is a whole new ball game because you have to go fast. So the speed limit is 70 miles per hour, which is about 100 kilometers per hour. You shouldn't go faster, but you also shouldn't go slower. So that's what you have to do. Another idiom is to throw in the towel, and that comes from boxing. When boxers, when they box, they get all hot and sweaty, and somebody brings a towel and, wipes them. And so to throw in the towel means to give up. So, so when I was learning to drive, so many times I just wanted to throw in the towel and say, I'm not going to do it. This is horrible. I hate driving. It's stressing me out. But I had no choice. I didn't have the option of throwing in the towel. I had to learn to drive. Knock it out of the park is another idiom from baseball, I think, because they have the ballpark and then they have the ball, and I don't understand baseball. So to knock it out of the park simply means to do something really well, to succeed, to achieve impressive results. So, I heard a doctor talking to a patient, and the doctor said, we got the test results and you knocked it out of the park. You are doing really, really well. The results were great. And I think the treatment we're giving you is working. So you knocked it out of the park. Another idiom we have here is back the wrong horse. You can guess it. It came from horse racing. And to back the wrong horse means to choose like the wrong person or a wrong something. You chose the wrong something to support. So, I had a choice between hiring as a boss, as a manager. I had a choice between hiring two people. I chose this person, but he's not doing a good job. So I clearly backed the wrong horse. I hope you're not tired of sports idioms because I have more for you. And this is just a tiny, tiny fraction of, hundreds of sports idioms that people use every day. This idiom we use a lot. I don't know, for some reason my husband and we use this phrase a lot, to get a second wind. It comes from sailing. When you have a boat And sailboats, they need wind. They're powered by wind. And so this means to get a second wind after you are, like, you've been doing something and you're tired, and then suddenly you're like, wait a minute, I still have some energy. So it means you get a second wind. It often happens maybe because we have a dog, and so we'll often say, like, we'll go to a dog park and our dog will play with other dogs, or she will chase the ball, and then she'll get tired, and we say, okay, looks like she had enough. Let's take her home. And then she'll see another interesting dog, and she'll start playing with this new interesting dog, and we're like, oh, look at that. She got a second wind. Great. Looks like we'll be staying here for another while. Next idiom, show or learn the ropes, also comes from sailing, because when you're sailing on a yacht or a boat, you have all these ropes, which I don't know why you have these ropes. Clearly, I've never been sailing. But basically, when you talk about, you have somebody new who came to work in your company or your school, and so you can show this person the ropes. This just means you kind of tell them, how things work, where the bathroom is, how to use the printer, and the same with learn the ropes. Whenever you start working in a new place, it takes a little while to learn the ropes before you learn, how things work. A long shot comes from hunting, and it means that the chance of something is not very high. So, for example, yesterday it was about 6 o'clock in the evening. It was kind of dark and raining, and I was like, I want to take my dog for a walk, and I'm wondering if my friend wants to go. Probably not, because, like I said, dark, late, and raining, but I'll try anyway. And so I texted her, and I was like, hey, you want to go to Marymore? And she said, no, I'm tired, it's late, and it's raining. And I said, okay, yeah, it was a long shot. So it means that, I knew that probably she wasn't going to say yes, but I tried anyway. Off base comes from baseball again, and it just means you're wrong about something. So, somebody might tell you you're way off base, meaning, you're not saying the right thing. So I could say, my friend didn't call me yesterday. Probably she's mad at me. She's angry. She doesn't like me anymore. And somebody can say, no, you're way off base. She's just tired and, busy. The world does not revolve around you, Yuliya. And the last one is to take a rain check. So this is that phrase. I don't know. I remember reading this phrase in a book and thinking, what the hell is a rain check? Also comes from baseball, unsurprisingly. And I guess in baseball, if it's raining, they don't have a game. They move the game to another day. And then you can go to this game, but you use the same ticket, right? You don't have to buy a new ticket. And so in real life, what it means is that, you arrange to meet a friend, and then the friend says, hey, I'm not feeling so good. Can we meet another time? Or can we take a rain check? This basically means let's meet for sure, but let's do it another time on another day. So that's basically what it means to agree to postpone like a meeting or a date to another day. So yeah, this is just a little glimpse into the world of sports idioms that American English is just full of. And I don't know if you are interested and if you were taking notes or if you took a photo, but if you need me to send you the list of these idioms as well as some sources, I'm happy to do that. Now, moving on to the next section. So we talked about small talk and connected speech and sports. The next discovery about the English language in the US is that it's all about geography. And one thing that's always, kind of made me laugh is that students say, I want to learn to speak English like a native speaker. And that's the thing, a native speaker, not the native speaker, a native speaker. What kind of a native speaker? And Probably when people say this, most of them, they're imagining British English and somebody speaking with what's called the BBC English, you know, this perfect British accent that you would hear on the news. And people don't think that actually native speakers, they come in all, they come with all sorts of accents. And here in the US, the same as in England, there is a huge variation in accents, depending on where you live. I wish I was good at imitating accents. I'm not. I'm not very artistic, but it really, really sounds different. And I don't think we have that in the Russian language. I was born in Russia and I am Russian, but I've never seen this where you talk to somebody and you say, huh, you're from Yekaterinburg, or you must be from Vladivostok. It just doesn't happen. Whereas here, it's pretty clear. You can be like, oh, this person is from Boston, or this person is from the South, and some people who are really good at it, they can even differentiate between the southern states, not just the South, but Texas or, Tennessee. And I can't really explain to you the difference between accents without imitating them. So if you're interested, look up on YouTube. They have lots of videos where people who are good at imitating accents, they say, they do something like all of this accents from all of the states. Just to give you an example, though, so I mentioned Boston. People from Boston probably have the most British accent of all American accents. They don't pronounce the letter R. So they'll say, people here say car, they'll say car. Or instead of or, like I'm saying now, they'll say aw. So yeah, that's just one expression. That's just one example. And there are also, moreover, there are variation in vocabulary as well. So just to give you one example, drinks like Pepsi or cola, some states call it soda. So they say like, do you want a soda? And what they mean is, do you want a drink like a Coke or a Pepsi or a Fanta? In some states, they call it pop or soda pop. So same country, different words, different phrases. And they also have, different regions also have like specific phrases that are only used in these regions. So in the South, people say, bless your heart. Oh, darling, bless your heart. And it sounds really nice, but it's not. People say that when they think you're stupid. Or, instead of saying something bad to you, they say, oh, bless your heart. And that means that they're thinking, oh my God, you're really, really stupid. So, yeah, that's just one example. And then, of course, another thing is that America, as we know, is the melting pot. It's the country of the nation of immigrants. And so you have people here from all over the world. And, you might come to the US and you might think, I've been practicing, I've been listening to American English. I'm going to do great. And then you encounter people who are Spanish speakers, people who are from India or from China or from Japan or Vietnam. So, who also have their own ways of speaking and pronouncing words. And that's also something that you need to get used to when you go and live in another country. An English-speaking country, is that you won't just encounter native speakers, you'll encounter speakers of other languages, and that it totally depends on where you are. So here in Seattle, we have a lot of people from there's a lot of traditional migration from China, also Vietnam, Japan. Some regions, they'll have lots and lots of Spanish speakers. So, yeah. Okay. I think we're almost coming to the end. And here are just some other random facts that I've noticed. And one is that native speakers make mistakes too. It makes me really mad. One thing is that, how we talked about connected speech, right? And connected speech means that we don't pronounce words as a whole when we speak, quickly. So when we talk about models in the past, right, we say, you should have done it. When spoken quickly, you should have done it. You should have done it. And so people who are not very literate, who don't know, who maybe haven't been to school or they left school early, when they hear it, it sounds like you should have done it. Should have done it. So they might not realize that this if is have. And so I have seen native speakers actually write, you should have done it. That's, if you're looking at the presentation, that's one of the examples. I've also seen people, we are always, when we talk about models in the past, we say must have verb 3. Well, I've heard people say things like you must have did it instead of you must have done it. Or, when we talk about third conditional, like if you, if you didn't help me, I couldn't, or if you hadn't helped me, I couldn't do it instead of couldn't have done it. Another thing, the last one really makes me mad. When you go to the supermarket, you have a normal checkout, and then you have something called express checkout. And express checkout is where you go when you have not so many things, right? And they say 15 items or less. Why is that a problem? Well, when we talk about quantities, if something means all people are human, I know. I'm human too. I make mistakes too. In Russian, definitely in Russian, especially in Russian, because nowadays I speak English more than Russian. And so, but yeah, should be 15 items or fewer because items are countable. So yeah, but also, another thing is that, like we always learn that love or want is a state verb, and it shouldn't be used in gerund. So we say I love, but not I'm loving. We say I want and not I'm wanting. And technically that is still the rule. However, in modern English, more and more, I heard people say I'm loving it. Just think about McDonald's and their slogan, oh, I'm loving it. And also want. So, I've heard people say like, oh, I've been wanting to do this for a while. Or actually when I was in New Zealand, I know this is about America, but when I was in New Zealand, I walked into a store and somebody said, are you wanting any help? And I was like, I'm not wanting any help, but I'm wanting you to learn some grammar and to learn that you can't use want like that. But clearly, that person was a native speaker, so who am I to tell them that they can't use want like that, So language is changing, and what I usually tell my students is that, because they ask me, they say, I heard at McDonald's, McDonald's said in English, and they say loving it. And I say, or, they hear a song where somebody says, I ain't a fool instead of I'm not a fool. And I say, all that is fine and well if you're speaking, with somebody in everyday life. However, if you're interested in taking TOEFL or IELTS or, the Russian state exam, don't do that. Don't say ain't. Don't say I'm loving it because, that's not standard English yet, and you don't want to hurt your chances by doing that. Another interesting thing is that a lot of adults are unfamiliar with grammar terminology. And what I mean by that is that, in Russia, in school, we actually learn the Russian language. We learn the rules, and we learn, it's called meta language. So meta language is the language you use to talk about language. So as English teachers, this is our language. These are the words that we use every day. Verb, auxiliary verb, adjective, noun, question. So things like that. And because we learn that, or subject and verb, because we learn that in Russian, I found that although a lot of adults, Russian adults, will say, "Oh, I haven't thought about this in 30 years," but still they're sort of, it comes back to them after a while. And here, a lot of people, if they've never learned a foreign language, and and often, they haven't done so much grammar in school, they'll be totally unfamiliar with this. And when I was teaching Russian, at the place where I was teaching, it was called Tennessee Foreign Languages Institute. So the approach was to not talk about grammar at all. And so even though we were teaching adults, we were sort of kind of thought of them, we were almost approaching them like we would be teaching children. So we really didn't talk about rules or about, verbs or infinitives or gerunds. We just did a lot of examples and kind of tried to, to use examples to figure out what the rules were. Or we tried to learn patterns. So instead of learning, like, this is how it works, this is how you make a sentence, we kind of just looked at a lot of phrases. So like, instead of explaining, just to give you a simple example, instead of explaining that after state verbs, you often use the ing form, such as love, like, or verbs of preference. Sorry, not state verbs. But after verbs of preference, such as love, hate, enjoy, we use the ing form. Instead of saying all that, we might just have a little table where it would say love, like, hate, and then, I don't know, walking, shopping, drinking coffee, and then we'd have students make sentences, and then they will kind of figure out, okay, that's what you do. But we wouldn't, explicitly talk about the rule. So on the one hand, I do kind of think, it's not a terrible idea, but for me, I'm an analytical learner and also I'm an English teacher or, a language teacher. So I could never learn like that because I want to know. I want to know what the rule is, what the exceptions are. And so, yeah. And so, yeah, like I said, lots of adults who are not familiar with grammar will not know this language. And finally, one last thing that I want to say about English in the US is that there's a lot of hedging and a lot of indirect language. So one feature of this indirect language is people using like a lot. And I don't mean like as in I love this or I like this, but like as a parasite word. So I went shopping yesterday and there were 100 people and they were all buying stuff for Thanksgiving and I waited there for an hour, but then I gave up. So this is what a typical teenager or a young person sounds like. So the word like here is totally unnecessary. It's just there. So we also have these words in the Russian language. But yeah, people can use it as a parasite, but they can also use it as a way of sort of saying something indirectly. So she's crazy. People also, they soften their language a lot by saying sort of and kind of. So the British people, they say a bit or a little bit, but you can say that, oh, this soup is kind of salty. It's a little bit it's a little bit over salted. That means that soup is impossible to eat because it has so much salt. But nobody would say that. So they'll say kind of, it tastes as if it has a little bit too much salt. And so people say looks like and sounds like a lot. So you can be see, parasite word. But yeah, a doctor will say something like, oh, well, it looks like you're feeling better. And so they're being indirect. It's safer to be indirect because if you're wrong, then, you kind of safeguarded yourself. So instead of saying, I think you're better, it looks as if you're doing better. And so this way it sounds kind of like, just a theory. It's safer that way. So yeah. Yeah. So, this is pretty much it. I'm just checking to see, did I put my email here? I did not, but I'll put it in the chat. And we still have 5 minutes left. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in the chat, especially as I'm typing my email. And so the reason why I'm putting my email is that if you, want to learn more about any of the topics that I mentioned today, or you want some resources, like you want to know more sports idioms, you want to know about more, you want to know more about connected speech, so you can shoot me an email. Number 2, you can also send me suggestions for future webinars, something you want to know, something more practical for language teaching, like how to develop fluency. Yes, I love that. Suggestions. Yeah, maybe, you want to know how, my students aren't speaking. How can I develop fluency? So that's like one webinar. Actually, that's a webinar that I'm thinking of teaching. Or, maybe you want to know something about the US, like why do people in the US love Halloween so much? So yeah, just send me an email with any questions and suggestions. And actually, like I said, 4 more minutes left. You can go ahead and write and chat both questions and suggestions. And here is my email. Very simple. It's yuliya.speroff@gmail.com. Right there in the chat. And you can always, if you have ideas, yes, please do contact Olga Mikhailovna. And I don't know, actually, you've noticed that I'm using Olga Mikhailovna and not just Olga. And the reason why is that Olga Mikhailovna is one of my first English teachers. She's the person who made me fall in love with English. I still remember some of the books that she gave me to read, and which made me really interested in your blush. You should be. I mean, I mean it. What I'm saying this, I'm not just saying this to be nice. I really, really mean it. And I think she was the first teacher that had English lessons sort of like that look like what modern English lessons look like. When you talk in class, when you watch movies and read books, and when you aren't just, doing exercises over and over again. And so I have a really great respect and admiration for her. And when she asked me to do this webinar, I was really excited to be able to help her. And so I'm really excited to do more webinars in the future. And that's why your ideas are very much appreciated. Thank you to everyone who said thank you. You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure. I appreciate you spending an hour of your time listening to me. Oh, Novosibirsk Special Music School. I love it. Maybe monthly. Absolutely. We can do it monthly. Maybe even, even more often than that. Yeah. And luckily the time difference worked out so that, for you guys, it's early afternoon. It's not too late for me. It's 10 p.m. now, which, is fine. Yeah. Can I see from participant list? I haven't checked. Okay. Yeah, I do see that most of people are from Novosibirsk, and I love it because, it's my hometown and I miss it. And I'm hoping to visit maybe in the summer. It's hard to, Abakan, Yakutsk. Ooh, I heard that in Yakutsk it was minus 78 recently. It was like record cold temperature. I mean, oh, Victoria, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. That would be awesome to do another. Oh, there is even somebody from France. That's wonderful. Yeah, so we have somebody from Yelena. I assume that's somebody from Yakutsk. Yeah, I would also like to know what the weather is today, and just, we talked about small talk and we talked about the weather. Let me tell you what my weather is. Okay. It is 11 degrees and it's raining. And then for the rest of the week, I don't know if you guys can see it, but yeah, it's gonna rain for the rest of the week and it's just gonna be around 11 and 8 degrees. So Seattle is almost like the St. Petersburg. Yeah, we have somebody from St. Petersburg. Seattle is pretty much the St. Petersburg of the US. It has pretty rainy and gray autumn and winter because we are right by the ocean. So this ocean email, I wrote my email, but I'm happy to write it again. Let me do it. I guess it kind of got lost in all the other messages. Here we go. And yeah, I can send you parts of this presentation or anything else. I do have a blog. I haven't written in it in a while because I've been really busy with interpreting, and I started another blog for interpreters, and so I kind of haven't written very much in the my teaching blog, but it's still there. It has some good ideas, so I'm happy to share it with you. Here it is, and I have one for interpreting as well, just in case, somebody's interested in what interpreting is like and, wants to learn more, get some free resources. It's mostly geared towards medical interpreting. How long have you been living in America? I've been living here for just over a year. So I moved here in August of last year. So like a year and 3 months, I guess. Yeah. And I moved here. I first lived in Tennessee, which is a state in the South, Nashville, Tennessee. And then in May, my husband and I and our dog, Jackie, moved to Seattle and Washington State. Okay. So I'm just going to say goodbye. I see that somebody's writing something, so I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to get in all of your last questions, ideas, and suggestions. But I wanted to thank you for participating, for commenting, for asking questions. And it's been a pleasure, and I hope we'll have another webinar sometime soon. And I hope all of you have great rest of your day. And, ooh, I see somebody I know. Perfect. Okay, have a great rest of your day. And, oh, there's somebody who is doing their master's in France. That's excellent. Good job. Okay. All right. Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Olga Mikhailovna and the staff of Magellan for organizing this and for helping me with my technical issues. All right. I'm so glad that you guys are finding it interesting and useful. I'm very happy to hear that. All righty.